Pac-Mania for the Sega Master System, released in 1991 by Tech Magic and based on the 1987 Namco arcade game of the same name. It's an isometric take on the classic Pac-Man gameplay. Gameplay as it usually does, you eat all the dots in the maze, avoid contact with the ghosts until you nab a power pellet to turn them blue and make them edible for bonus points. Be sure to pick up the occasional fruit that pops up for bonus points. Instead of one singular maze though, you have 4 distinct mazes to gobble through, and the game even gives you the option of picking a starting maze from the first 3 in the event you want a tougher challenge from the get-go. Pac-Mania's main contribution is the ability to jump, providing Pac-Man with an additional means of escaping those pesky ghosts. And it's a nice jump with some decent height and good aerial control. Just don't rely too much on jumping to get you out of a bind, because some ghosts later down the road can also jump, and these are a little tougher to evade as a result. The game also throws in a couple power-ups such as a speed booster and a score modifier that increases the number of points earned in eating ghosts. So Pac-Mania is an updated take on the classic Pac-Man formula, and it was a rather fun game in its own right, at least in its original arcade incarnation. Pac-Mania on the Sega Master System could be best described as somewhat playable, albeit with some flaws, most notably in control, where sometimes pressing one direction in anticipation of a turn will cause Pac-Man to turn in the other direction, potentially screwing you over and having you run into a pursuing ghost, which is always fun. Speaking of screwing you over, collision detection also tends to be a bit spotty, as sometimes the game will outright not register you having gobbled up a dot despite having touched one, which can be extremely irritating at times. Meanwhile, the ghosts have such ridiculous hitboxes that they could kill your hapless Pac-Man despite there being about, 3 inches of air between them. Perfectly ridiculous. On the flip side of things, all 4 maze types have been retained in this Master System conversion, and there's even an additional hidden coin world maze that you can access by eating all the dots and only the dots in the first maze, which will cause a coin to appear and then immediately die because of this shit collision detection. But the coin will be there on your next life and you'll warp to Coin World, which is just the first maze in a different skin, but a nice little bonus to toss in there. And if you could put up with the game's half-cup controls and ridiculous hitboxes, you've got a fairly decent playing version of Pac-Mania that pretty much maintains the core gameplay from the arcade original. Not much in terms of options, not even one for 2-player alternating play. This is a single-player arcade romper only. Oh well. Not surprisingly, Pac-Mania doesn't look particularly good on the Master System, almost resembling a less colorful version of the Mega Drive port, which isn't saying a whole lot, because the Mega Drive port of Pac-Mania doesn't look very good either. The best I could offer is that it at least looks the part, but the character sprites are small and drab with their obnoxious outlines, and the mazes are somewhat unappealing to look at. At the very least, the flickering is minimal here, and there isn't much in the way of slowdown. Just don't expect to be blown away by the graphical prowess on display, despite the Master System usually being the 8-bit system with the better graphical capabilities. Sound doesn't fare any better either. The game manages to recreate some of the arcade tracks. The Sandbox World theme was omitted, but the tunes themselves sound pretty terrible on the Master System and start to get grating after a while. Sound effects are minimal, but what's there is there and not much else to say there, so there. That's all I got there. Overall, Pac-Mania for the Master System is not the best version of the game you'll come across, what with its stiff controls, poor audio-visual presentation, and atrocious hitboxes, and I'd go so far to say that it's probably the second worst home conversion of Pac-Mania that I've played, with the dreaded MSX version taking the cake in that department. That said, it's a version of Pac-Mania that's still mildly playable at best, if you're willing to put up with some of its quirks, but given its European exclusivity and the availability of other versions of Pac-Mania being more accessible and quite frankly playable, I would not lose any sleep over this one, for hardcore collectors and Pac enthusiasts only.